Good evening, everyone. I am Royal Master Candy, and I am very grateful. The company has given me this opportunity to share tonight. So, how do I go about it? In a moment, I will talk about how I prepared and the challenges I faced before meeting my goals. This is my life experience, and I believe many partners often ask me, Candy, what is it like? Many people are interested to know about me. It's Samuel's wife behind the scenes, a woman who supports those kinds of things, and I want to know more about that. Well, I've never shared my experiences from when I was young with anyone, which has led to my perseverance in these past few years. And even throughout my growth process, it's about how I was pushed to develop that kind of determination. First of all, I would like to share with everyone about this. When I was little, I was growing up in this house, and at that time, I would describe this house as very, very big. It was a courtyard house. I grew up in a very wealthy family. I would describe my childhood as a time when I didn't really understand what being wealthy meant. Back then, many people would tell me that I was the richest in the whole village. In fact, at that time, I really didn't know or care about it. But what I remember most is that many people could go out and ride bicycles. And I really liked riding bicycles too. But I don't know why. My family members told me not to go out riding my bike. They said it's because we are wealthy, and if I go out, it would be easy for me to get into an accident. And everyone would know that my family could afford to pay for it. I come from a family where everyone is a doctor. My grandfather was a director in Singapore, and my father-in-law and others are all quite famous doctors. My dad is also a doctor. So when I was little, it was quite good. The environment was like that. But when I was around 7 or 8 years old, a big change happened in my family. Suddenly, someone told me that my dad and mom, my dad would have to take my little brother away from me to another city, to Hong Kong. Of course, when I heard that, I was scared. At that time, it didn't matter to me whether we had money or not. It turned out that my parents, afterward, it was really sad for me that my parents were not around, right? So what happened next? My parents came to Hong Kong, and I believe that. At that time, I knew I was quite rebellious. At first, okay. I was quite rebellious, thinking it would attract attention, but then I realized it was useless. I found out that the more well-behaved I became, the more people liked me and cared for me. So I started to become very well-behaved. I remember when I was around 10 years old, I was living that kind of life. And after a few months, I didn't know where I would be living. Maybe I would go to Guangzhou. Then perhaps I would go back to the countryside to study a bit, and they would tell me that I needed to return to the countryside. After that, they would tell me that I needed to go to Shenzhen. Finally, around the early 2000s, I arrived in Shenzhen. At that time, when I first got to Shenzhen, I lived in Luhu district, which had tall buildings and a very nice environment. My grandfather had also bought an apartment there back then. I was studying in Shenzhen, and I was happy at that time, but I didn't think much about it. A few years later, my mom told me that I had to move to Hong Kong. At that time, if you asked me whether I wanted to come to Hong Kong, I wasn't really willing. I had already gotten used to moving around, and it felt like I had to move again. So when I arrived in Hong Kong, of course, there was no choice. I had to reunite with my family. I realized that, wow, the place is so beautiful. Hong Kong is so beautiful. But when I entered my house, I could only describe it as, wow, do I really have to survive here? I remember I came to Hong Kong in 1987 and lived in that house, which was a tin house. At night, it was dark, and my sister and I came down to Hong Kong during a heavy rain at night. And we had to grab a basin to catch the water. Otherwise, we would get drenched, and even the roof would be blown off in a storm. When I was blown away by the situation, I realized at that moment why I had lived so well in Shenzhen, surrounded by many friends, and then came to Hong Kong, where everything was so different. At that time, I told my mom that I was feeling sick and my whole leg was swollen from the mosquito bites. The environment was really quite harsh. At night, when it was dark, you basically didn't dare to go out because there were no lights, and the surroundings were really poor. I told my mom about it. When I came to Hong Kong, I didn't know how to study, and I felt lost. I told my mom that after living here for a year, I needed to help out and change my situation. I didn't want to live in such an environment anymore. And I even mentioned selling the house for whatever it could fetch. I said I would help pay the mortgage. At that moment, I thought about how my parents worked day and night just to earn a little money, and how they had to work overtime every Sunday after coming to Hong Kong. I don't see them that often. They work overtime every day. I know they said that if you work overtime on Sundays, you get double pay, so they are always working extra hours. At that time, I told myself that when I came to Hong Kong, wow, if I continued like this, it really wasn't what I wanted. It seemed like the environment was beautiful, the scenery was nice, and Hong Kong was a really good place. But when I got here, it turned out to be a completely different story. So at that time, I told myself that I had to rely on myself and use my own willpower to make my parents proud. My dad was a doctor in mainland China, and when he came to Hong Kong, he worked in a factory and earned very little money, just enough to make a living. At that time, I thought to myself, since I had come to Hong Kong and my English wasn't good, what could I do? I told myself that I had to learn a skill to help myself. To continue, I started to reflect on my inner self, realizing that I had to change. I didn't want my parents to work so hard. So at that time, I began my journey because I was a chubby girl in my teens trying to lose weight. But in the end, I found out that I actually had a talent for dancing. I got my instructor's license, and for those few years, I dedicated myself to teaching dance. I taught for 4 years, and it was really tough. At one point, my record was teaching 7 classes in one day. Back then, I could earn about $50 an hour, which was considered quite good at the end of the 1980s, especially since I was teaching at the municipal level. But then I thought, how can I do it? I could earn more money, but teaching 7 classes felt really tough for me. In the end, I realized that the only way was to compete. Once I won awards and competitions, my value would increase. So I worked really hard, practicing dance even at 3:30 in the morning while others were sleeping. As a result, I did win the awards I wanted, and then my income followed. Many people were eager to hire me for dance performances, even at cultural centers and space museums where there were a lot of students. Back then, in the 90s, during the 80s, health dance was very popular, so my income was quite good. But at that time, why did I urgently need to make money? I only knew that I was dancing in Hong Kong, and I couldn't dance for a long time. If I were a bit older, maybe in my 20s or 30s, if I got injured, I would have to stop. This is because dancing relies on hard work, and when I dance, I end up soaking wet all over. In the end, I was risking everything to dance, but I realized something. It's not what I want. I can't continue in this job where I have to stop working to make a living. I really want to learn beauty therapy, but in the 1980s, studying beauty required a lot of money. You can't just go and learn without paying. If you don't pay, you'll always be stuck doing menial jobs like carrying things or serving drinks. If I had the money to pay, they would teach me. So I worked hard to learn beauty therapy while also learning dance. As a result, by the time I was 18, I had my own. It's a beauty salon. And I remember when I started, with 2 beauty beds, people around me were pouring cold water on my enthusiasm, saying, "Don't be silly, people are closing down their beauty salons." You know, my friends, whether they are happy or not, everyone there is going out of business. You're definitely in big trouble, wasting your hard-earned money on this investment. I told myself that I only had 1 customer since I opened the shop, and then I thought about how I could prove them wrong. How do I ensure that I won't go bankrupt? Then I thought, since everyone else starts work at noon, I can start at 8 o'clock. After the mothers drop off their children at school, they can find a place that opens early so I can attract these customers, right? Yes, while others take Sundays off, I won't, so I can attract this group of clients. But after 6 months of doing this, I started to expand because I couldn't handle the number of clients anymore. As a result, I expanded to 6 beauty beds, and it just kept growing bigger and bigger. At my peak, I had 15 beauty treatment beds. But then came SARS. I remember during that time, as my business grew, my expenses also. increased significantly. I was making money and owned my own apartment, which was over 1,000 square feet. And I had hired help at home. Many people envied my lifestyle back then. However, with SARS, I realized that I could end up using all my savings. Because there really is no business every day. And there are times when the rent increases. Plus, I end up with pain all over my body. And my occupational illness is getting worse. At that time, I often shared with the owners of beauty salons. I said, especially during the new year, on the 28th, right? After taking a 10-day holiday, I immediately have to pay rent again. It's really stressful, you know. After just coming back from vacation, I have to pay rent and salaries again. I actually feel a lot of pressure. And when all my occupational ailments started to surface, I told myself that this time during the SARS outbreak, I was almost at my limit. I had already exhausted all my savings and resources for my apartment. If another wave comes, I wonder if I can handle it. I naturally ask myself if I can really cope. If I continue to rely on my competitors like this, I won't be able to manage. At that time, I told myself that I can't let it become that way. In my long-term career, I started to step out in 2003. I began working at a water machine company. At that time, I was quite sensitive. I had been a boss for over 10 years, and I had to tell you that talking about water machines really didn't suit me. I was more into looking good. And suddenly, I had to talk about water machines. At that time, I couldn't get over my own feelings for the first 6 months. I just couldn't do it because I cared too much about my face and couldn't let go. I was still attached to being the boss lady. As a result, I couldn't manage for half a year. One day, there was an accident where I broke a bone while playing. And during that half year, I was at home with no income. The beauty salon had already been holding on, and I was at zero income. Of course, I was holding on to that beauty salon at that time, and my family thought I was doing fine. Are you stupid? You've really experienced over 10 years with many customers. Why would you throw away the beauty salon? My family was very angry at that time, but they didn't understand me. As a result, my family was very worried about me for that half a year, and I had to pay my family expenses, and I didn't want them to know. You know, that economic class, I had to pay my family expenses on time every month. During that half a year, normally, I would have been completely exhausted, losing all my motivation and not wanting to do anything at all. But at that time, I was thinking that my beauty salon was gone and I had no way out. What could I do? Actually, for the next 6 months, I started paying attention to their messages. Wow, they could do this and that. So there was no reason I couldn't do it too. After thinking about it for half a year, I told myself that as long as I could get back on my feet, I would definitely make it happen. As a result, I started to rebuild my life again after 6 months. Following the same speed for a year, I can achieve the highest level even after taking a 6-month break. Yes, when the global profit sharing came, the process was indeed tough, very tough. But when I reached my best, I was filled with hope. Well, from one system change to another, it kept changing, and then it disappeared. You might earn $100,000, but it could turn into $10,000, then $5,000, and eventually become nothing. So I didn't do it anymore. Didn't do it after that, right? Of course, well, fortunately, thank the Lord for giving me a happy family, and I have 2 sons and a husband who loves me very much. It's really fair, yes. Then in those years, I started getting married. Yes, having children, being pregnant. And I remember my grandmother telling me, it's like brainwashing when you tell me, you don't need to work anymore. I don't need you to do anything. My son is very good at making money. You just need to help me raise the 2 grandchildren, and that's it. This is how your life will be. Yes, that's really how it is for me. But at that time, even my husband was saying to me, yes, you can retire now after working so hard for so long. From now on, you just take care of the kids. You do a great job at it, and I'm really good at taking care of the kids too. They say I do a great job and give me high scores for it. Of course, that made me happy. But as time went on, I felt quite satisfied and realized that I actually didn't mind taking care of the kids at all. I put a lot of effort into it and was really happy doing it. But as time passed, it just went on. When my son started to grow up, I slowly began to realize that there were times when he really started to become independent. I always felt the need to be there for him, but it turned out he no longer needed me as much. One day, I drove to his school, and when I got there, he told me, Mommy, you can go now. I was surprised and said, What? I just got to this school and you're telling me to leave? I want to take the bus. I said it doesn't matter. And he said I should take the bus with my classmates. He told me to have my classmates get on the bus and I could just drive them. I didn't need to wait for him at the bus stop. At that moment, I felt really, really sad. It seemed like my son no longer needed me and I felt like I had no value. At that time, I started telling myself that I was actually very happy and content. But ironically, my mind was filled with thoughts that made me realize I was slowly losing my value and starting to lose myself, feeling lost. I lost my sense of self and felt truly worthless. I told Samuel that I was very happy, but he doesn't know how much money he gets paid each month. All the cards are in my hands. He only has one credit card. So what about that credit card? Actually, it's just for him to say, hey, husband, you pay the bill. In reality, I'm the one who settles the payments. Then, if he needs to pay for a meal and he doesn't have cash, he asks for help. But even now, it's still the same with him. There's nothing. Just a credit card is all I have to rely on. I realized that I'm feeling increasingly worthless. So I told her husband, no, I really need this. I feel like I know how to raise a child, but right now it seems like I have no value at all. Besides knowing how to raise a child, it feels like I don't know anything. It seems my son is starting to say, Mom, you should go take the Kowloon driving test. Talking about driving, I really don't like driving at all, but there's no choice. Her husband told me, you don't want your son to be left out, do you? If you step on the fish, you will definitely be thick-skinned. And as a result, I really became thick-skinned. After the exam, I only knew how to drive from school back home, just going around the Tuen Mun area, driving back and forth to the market and home. That's all. I found someone to practice driving with. I was just practicing in the kindergarten parking lot, school, and market. That's how I learned. So after practicing, it was like this, driving like that. My son told me, Mommy, why don't you wait for a Kowloon license? I asked, why don't you set your mind to it and go for the Kowloon license? Then he said, you only know how to drive in Tuen Mun, which means you have a Tuen Mun license, but why don't you have a Kowloon license? Indeed, the fact is that up to this moment, after driving for over 10 years, I have never driven out of Kowloon. I don't know how to drive. Yeah, I really have no direction. When Samuel told me about it, I was so happy. Honestly, I am really grateful for the opportunity I had. My introducer, Vivi, who is not here now, has been very dedicated in talking to me for several years. Actually, I have to tell you, I really didn't pay much attention to her following me. He sent it to him, Sai, you sent it to me and I did it, so I told him like this. He kept coming to find me. Whether he was tired or not, he kept coming to my place and talking to me nonstop. One day he came and said, Samuel, we are here. He talked to me and Samuel was listening. This is a really good old friend. I definitely can't ignore him. He's really impressive. I said, you are really amazing, always coming to find me. I told him and he just smiled. He said, if you don't listen, I'll keep talking. I said, it's okay. Just tell me what good things you have and I'll buy them from you. He just kept talking to me, saying that if you don't like to hear a lot, he will continue talking to you. He is really impressive. So when you encounter those around you, you really need to give them more time. Don't just stop talking to them if they ignore you after this conversation. Actually, I am really grateful for this benefactor who has truly helped me and brought me to this point. Initially, I told you that my husband was the one who said this to me. Honey, wow, we've encountered an incredible business. He said it's definitely not an ordinary business. It's a big deal, really impressive. Then he came to me first and told me, I know you've done a lot before and have been very successful. But first, you poured me a glass of water. He said we need to learn again, and I'm very obedient. But he really is my husband and my idol. I listen to everything he says. Whatever she said, I listened. So what happened next? From then on, she really told me to learn. And I knew that I had to put aside my previous high status. Yes, I had done quite well before, but that's in the past. Now I need to start anew. You have to figure out how to move forward and just follow that path. You need to learn. I often learn with her, and we regularly compete to see who can watch more videos. What do you think? Everyone sees it, but we are here now. Even if we are enduring hardships, this meeting is good. We attend everything. Whenever you see us, we are always together, and that includes our leader, our team leader. But I also see that this is a replication. We, as a couple, truly lead by example. And it turns out that our team is inspired by the leaders, each one replicating that. I am very grateful to have met this group. a good confidant, and a good team truly make a great leader. With a common goal, everyone works hard together. And at that time, there was absolutely no doubt. We just believed in ourselves. We told them that we would push through and everyone move forward at the same time. Yes, in this case, let me take a look. Everyone, take a look at how we started this education center. Back then, what were the two of us thinking? In fact, many people thought we were foolish at that time. I remember very clearly that during the peak of the pandemic, we opened the education center in June. I remember we looked at it for 2 or 3 days and then decided immediately, because there were restrictions outside and we couldn't gather. So we just immediately settled on this education center. So here we are, going through this process. Do you think there have been ups and downs? Of course there have. Some people even think my partner and I are a bit foolish. The company hasn't even opened yet, and you're starting an education center. When will it open? I don't know. People ask me how much money we make, but we haven't made a single cent yet. So how are you doing? What level have you reached? We haven't even become members yet. That's how we've been managing it, of course. Are there ups and downs? Yes, there are. But as long as we believe firmly, I tell others that it doesn't matter. If we don't open this year, we will open next year. That's the strong belief I have. Here, we also inherit the culture of enduring through challenges from our company. Yes, sharing culture is important. The most crucial thing is that our global masters and leaders always say we must do good deeds to accumulate blessings. I often argue with Samuel about this. We must do good for our team, the next generation, and the people around our families. This is essential. For example, there is a church in Laos. During a critical time, we made a donation to help rebuild a church. The picture below shows the situation in the Philippines, which was affected by flooding. We were determined to contribute to their needs. Additionally, last month, together with a group of leaders, we gathered with our Star Master leaders. So we went to distribute food at the banyan tree, and that feeling was much happier than I imagined. After we finished, it was such positive energy and happiness. When we went to distribute food dressed as leaders, there were some elderly people, and the line was really long. I saw it stretching out, and it turned out they had been crying since early morning just for a meal box. We only started distributing at 3 or 4 o'clock. It seems like we started lining up at 8 o'clock. So it was really touching. We saw the elderly people coming, and they were genuinely helping those in need. They told me, I started lining up at 8 o'clock, even when we handed them the food. They were very moved, saying, I haven't had chicken rice in a long time. The rice was hot and fragrant. After getting the food, they sat in the park and immediately started eating. I really want to continue doing this a lot in the future. Well, we all want our leaders to continue doing this, to contribute to society. I also went back to tell my son, and he said he would join me next time. This is also a goal that my husband and I have set, to keep doing good deeds. Moving forward, we want to continuously contribute. This is truly what we have always wanted to do. So this is what we most want to achieve. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the experience. To be honest, when I first met the situation, my first feeling was that I didn't have to ask my friends to bring in other friends or make money from them to join. I just wanted to tell my friends that you can buy this for the same amount of money I did, and you can register for free. If you find it useful, you can even develop a business from it. I can help myself and help others through this endeavor. I see many leaders around me, and everyone has changed in different ways, including myself. I often spend time at the education center, and I always tell you how old I am. I often mention that I am 52 years old. Let me share with you my experiences before I joined. My son doesn't even know how old I am. He once missed the years when my mom and dad were born. I know I'm pretty good at math, so I can calculate how many years ago that was. But when I face my son, I forget. Why is that? I feel very sad in front of my son. I can't even dare to let him know how old I am. That's the kind of state I was in at that time. Wow, I've really gained weight and my skin looks terrifying. It's really bad. After going through this, I often tell people that they wouldn't know how old I am. It's quite amazing. And you can see that the elderly around you and their families are becoming healthier and healthier. I remember my parents were very frugal. They were really thrifty. When you want to buy health supplements, it can be quite difficult, almost like having to coax them like children. I often find myself trying to persuade them. I often tell them that the prizes are from the company. I got promoted and the company sent me more prizes. So this is free. You definitely have to eat it. If you don't, it will expire and go to waste. I have to keep telling their parents that everything is free. Last month, I did well in my performance and received another batch for them. So my parents will eat a lot. Don't waste it. You need to eat well for your body to be healthier. You're really impressive. What about after eating? I haven't caught a cold in 2 years. After hearing this, I was really excited. I feel that this can bring health to my parents, which is better than spending money on them or taking them out to play as they don't even want to go. My parent told me that before, when going to the market to buy groceries, they would be out of breath. But now they say they can walk for 2 hours a day without getting breathless. And the more they walk, the easier it feels. And they are over 80 years old. Their health is getting better and better, so this is really worth it. That's why I often talk about it with the people around me. Listen, I have to share something with you about the people around me. After sharing, if you don't react much, that's okay. Some people are really grateful, and I appreciate that. If some people can't hear me, I will just tell them, and that's fine. Maybe your luck hasn't arrived yet. Your blessings haven't come yet. When your luck is good, you'll know I'm here helping you. You need an opportunity. And I believe that if you endure a little longer, it can really be like what our president said, what our boss said about wanting to help others escape poverty. We don't want to pass on poverty to the next generation. We can't pass on poverty to the next generation. So we have to seize the opportunity. We can already see it. So for those who haven't registered yet, quickly find your friends and register for free. It doesn't cost anything. And it's another chance to give yourself an opportunity. This could be a significant turning point in life. And it has already happened for my family. They have changed a lot as a couple. In the past, we were both busy with our own things, but now we are always together. In fact, I want to share that my car license plate has been unused for 3 years. I haven't driven at all. My husband has been a driver for a long time, and I go everywhere with him. This is really good for us, as we can take care of our son together. My 2 sons really need companionship right now, especially during their rebellious phase, and we have a lot of time to spend together. Accompanying you into the upcoming year, 2024. Of course, there must be goals for 2024. Without goals, a person will stagnate and may lose direction. In 2024, I want to lead 20 people to become stars. Yes, there are 6 that need to go to the Royal Master. We need to prepare to send the Crown Master in 2026. It's great to see the photos, and that's all I want to share.